The grand hall of Kensington Palace fell silent. Every footstep echoed against the marble floors like thunder. Princess Charlotte stood frozen near the towering windows, her small hands trembling at her sides. She was only 9 years old, but in that moment, she looked even younger. Outside, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions that turned into a dull roar behind the thick glass. Inside, voices rose in anger. Adult voices. Voices that should have protected her, but now filled the air. With accusations and blame, Charlotte's eyes darted toward the doorway. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear, but her feet wouldn't move. Then she saw him. A royal guard stood at the far end of the corridor, tall, silent, his red uniform pristine, his expression unreadable. But his eyes were watching her. Not with duty. With something else. Something human. Before we continue, if you love stories that touch your heart and reveal hidden truths, subscribe now. You won't want to miss what happens next. The argument started 3 hours earlier. Charlotte had been in her private study, working on a watercolor painting of the palace gardens. She loved painting. It was the one place where no one expected anything from her, where she could just be a child. But then the door burst open. Her aunt stormed in, face flushed with anger. Behind her, 2 senior members of the royal household followed, their expressions tight with tension. "Where is it?" her aunt demanded. Charlotte looked up, paintbrush still in hand. "Where is what?" "Don't play games, Charlotte." "The necklace. The one that belonged to your grandmother. It's missing, and you were the last person seen near the display case." Charlotte's heart dropped. "I didn't take it. I would never. You were seen, Charlotte, by multiple staff members. Near the cabinet, alone." Tears welled in Charlotte's eyes. She stood up, her small frame shaking. "I looked at it. I didn't touch it, I swear," but no one seemed to hear her. The household members whispered among themselves. Her aunt paced back and forth, her heels clicking like a countdown. "This is a disaster," her aunt muttered. "If the press finds out, if anyone finds out that a member of the family is accused of theft, I didn't steal anything." Charlotte's voice cracked. It was rare for her to shout. She was taught never to raise her voice. But fear and injustice had taken over. Her aunt stopped and stared at her coldly. "Whether you did or not, you are at the center of this mess. And until that necklace is found, you will remain under scrutiny." The words hit like stones. Charlotte felt the walls closing in. She was guilty until proven innocent. In her own home, in her own family. That's when they moved her to the grand hall. Away from her room, away from her paintings, like she was a suspect, not a princess. Hours passed. The whispers grew louder. More people arrived. Security was tightened. Charlotte stood by the window, watching the world outside continue as if nothing was wrong. She had never felt so alone, until the guard stepped forward. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He simply positioned himself between Charlotte and the others. A silent wall of protection. His jaw was set, his posture firm, and for the first time that day, Charlotte felt like someone believed her. The guard's name was Thomas Calloway. He had served in the royal household for 12 years. He was known for his discipline, his silence, and his loyalty. He never spoke unless spoken to. He never questioned orders. But today, something was different. He had watched Princess Charlotte grow up. He had seen her first steps in the palace gardens, her shy waves during public events, her quiet kindness toward the staff. She was not like the others. She had a softness the world hadn't hardened yet, and now she was being treated like a criminal. Thomas stood firm, his eyes scanning the room. The household members shot him glances, some confused, some annoyed, but he didn't move. One of the senior advisors, a man named Gregory Wells, stepped forward. His gray suit was immaculate, his expression sharp. "Guard Calloway," Gregory said coolly. "You are dismissed. Return to your post outside." Thomas didn't move. Gregory's eyes narrowed. "Did you hear me? I said, you are dismissed." Thomas finally spoke, his voice low but clear. "With respect, sir, I am assigned to the security of this wing. Princess Charlotte is within this wing. I remain." The room tensed. Guards didn't talk back. They obeyed. Always. Gregory's face reddened. "You overstep your bounds, Calloway. This is a private matter. Family business. You are not needed here." Thomas's gaze didn't waver. "A child is frightened. I am needed here." Silence fell like a blade. Charlotte looked up at Thomas, her eyes wide with disbelief. No one had ever stood up for her like this. Not in this way. Her aunt stepped forward, anger flashing in her eyes. "You forget your place, guard. You serve the crown, not your own judgments." Thomas turned his head slightly, just enough to meet her gaze. "I serve the crown, ma'am. And the crown includes her." He nodded toward Charlotte. The weight of his words hung in the air. Charlotte felt a warmth spread through her chest. Someone believed her. Someone saw her not as a problem, but as a person. But the tension was rising. Gregory moved closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You will regret this insubordination, Calloway. I will see to it personally." Thomas said nothing. He simply returned his gaze forward, standing like a stone sentinel. Hours dragged on. The palace staff continued their search. Every room, every corridor, every drawer. The necklace had vanished without a trace. Charlotte sat on a velvet bench near the window, exhausted. Thomas remained nearby, never sitting, never relaxing. Just present. At one point Charlotte whispered, "Thank you." Thomas didn't look at her, but his voice, soft and kind, reached her anyway. "You have nothing to thank me for, Your Highness. You believe me?" she said quietly. "That's everything." A flicker of something sadness, perhaps, crossed Thomas's face. "I do." As night fell, the search continued. But something else was brewing. Gregory Wells had made calls. Whispers of Thomas's defiance spread through the household. Some admired him. Others called him reckless. And in the shadows, someone was watching. Someone who knew exactly where the necklace was. Asterisk, asterisk, morning light broke through the tall windows of Kensington Palace. Charlotte had barely slept. She curled up on the bench, her body heavy with exhaustion and fear. Thomas had stayed awake all night, standing guard, silent as ever. The palace buzzed with activity. Staff moved quickly, faces tight with stress. The missing necklace had become a crisis. Not just because of its value, but because of what it represented. It belonged to the late Queen. It was history. Legacy. And now, it was gone, and a 9-year-old. Girl was blamed for it. By mid-morning, a meeting was called. Senior members of the household gathered in the private drawing room. Charlotte was not invited. She was told to remain in the grand hall under watch. Thomas, however, was summoned. He entered the room, his uniform crisp, his expression neutral. Around the long table sat 6 people. Gregory Wells at the head. Charlotte's aunt beside him. Security chiefs. Legal advisors. All eyes turned to Thomas. Gregory leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Guard Calloway." "We have a problem." Thomas said nothing. "You defied a direct order yesterday," Gregory continued. "You questioned authority. You inserted yourself into matters beyond your station." Thomas met his gaze evenly. "I protected a member of the royal family." "From what?" Gregory snapped. "From her own family? From the people who care for her? From being treated unjustly?" Thomas replied, his voice calm but firm. The room stirred. One of the advisors shifted uncomfortably. Charlotte's aunt, however, remained stone-faced. "You overstep, Calloway," she said coldly. "Charlotte is not your concern. She is ours. We decide what is just." Thomas paused, choosing his words carefully. "With respect, ma'am, justice is not decided by authority. It is decided by truth." Gregory slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. You will leave the palace grounds by noon." The words echoed like a gunshot. Thomas's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He simply nodded once, turned, and walked toward the door. But just as his hand touched the handle, another voice cut through the room. Wait, everyone turned. A woman stood in the doorway. Older, gray-haired, dressed in a simple navy suit. It was Margaret Hale, the head housekeeper. She had worked in the palace for over 30 years. She was respected, trusted, and she rarely spoke in meetings like this. But now, she stepped forward, her face lined with determination. "I have something to say," Margaret announced, "and you all need to hear it." Gregory frowned. "Margaret, the necklace was not stolen by Princess Charlotte," Margaret interrupted, her voice steady. "I know, because I saw who took it." The room went silent. Every eye locked on her. Charlotte's aunt stood slowly. "What are you saying?" Margaret took a breath. "I saw one of the staff members near the cabinet 2 nights ago. Late, after hours. I didn't think much of it at the time. But when the necklace went missing, I started to remember. And this morning, I checked the security logs." She pulled a small tablet from her bag and placed it on the table. "The cameras were disabled in that wing for exactly 17 minutes. Someone with access to the security system did that." Gregory's face paled. "Who?" Margaret looked directly at him. "Your assistant, David Brennan." The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Shock and disbelief filled the air. Gregory stammered, shaking his head. "That's impossible." "David has been with me for years and he's been gambling," Margaret said sharply. "Heavily. I've seen the letters. The threats. He needed money. Fast." Thomas stood frozen by the door. Watching it all unfold, Charlotte's aunt sank back into her chair, her face drained of color. "Where is he now?" "Gone," Margaret said. "He didn't show up for work this morning. His apartment is empty. He's fled." The truth crashed down like a wave. Charlotte was innocent. She had been all along. Within the hour, the palace was in motion. Security teams were dispatched. Police were notified. David Brennan's face was circulated across agencies. But he had a head start, and he knew how to disappear. In the grand hall, Charlotte sat quietly, still unaware of what had just been revealed. Thomas returned to her side, his expression unreadable. But there was a softness in his eyes now, a quiet relief. Margaret entered the hall, walking slowly toward Charlotte. The girl looked up, her face pale and tired. "Princess Charlotte," Margaret said gently, kneeling down to her level. "I have something important to tell you." Charlotte's heart raced. She braced herself for more accusations, more blame, but Margaret smiled. A real, warm smile. "You didn't do anything wrong. We know that now. We know the truth." Charlotte blinked, confused. "What? What do you mean?" "The necklace was taken by someone else. A staff member. He's been caught." "Well, not yet, but he will be. You are innocent, sweetheart. Completely innocent." Tears spilled down Charlotte's cheeks. Not from sadness this time, but from relief. From release. The weight she had carried for an entire day lifted all at once. She looked up at Thomas. He gave her the smallest nod. A quiet acknowledgement. A silent promise kept. Margaret stood and placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "You did the right thing, Calloway. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Thomas said nothing, but the gratitude in his eyes spoke volumes. Later that afternoon, Charlotte's parents returned to the palace. They had been away on official duties and had rushed back the moment they heard. Her mother swept Charlotte into her arms, holding her tightly. "I'm so sorry," her mother whispered. "I'm so sorry." Charlotte clung to her, finally feeling safe again. Her father approached Thomas, his expression serious but respectful. "I was told what you did, how you stood by her when others didn't." Thomas straightened. "I only did my duty, sir." "Oh," her father said firmly. "You did more than that. You showed courage and honor. That is not something I will forget." Thomas bowed his head. "Thank you, sir." That evening, as the sun set over the palace grounds, Charlotte found Thomas in the corridor. He was preparing to leave for the night. She walked up to him, her small hands clutching a folded piece of paper. "I made this for you," she said shyly. Thomas took it carefully and unfolded it. It was a drawing, a watercolor painting of a guard standing in front of a castle. Strong, steady, protective at the bottom. In careful handwriting it read, "To Thomas." "My hero." Thomas's throat tightened. He looked down at Charlotte, this brave little girl who had endured so much. "Thank you, Your Highness," he said softly. "I will treasure this." Charlotte smiled. A real smile. The first one in days. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. A bond forged not by title or duty, but by simple, honest humanity. Part 5. 3 days later, David Brennan was found. He had fled to France, trying to sell the necklace through underground channels. But Margaret's evidence had been solid. International authorities moved quickly. He was arrested at a small pawn shop in Paris. The necklace still in his possession, the news spread through the palace like wildfire. Relief mixed with anger. How could someone so trusted betray them so deeply? Gregory Wells resigned quietly. He had been Brennan's supervisor. The failure was his to bear, whether he knew of the crime or not. He left without ceremony, his career in ruins. But for Charlotte, the ordeal was over. Her name was cleared, her innocence restored. Yet the experience had changed her. She was quieter now, more thoughtful. She had learned a hard lesson about trust, about power, and about how quickly the world could turn against you. But she had also learned something else. She had learned that courage could come from unexpected places, that sometimes people with the least power held the most integrity. She thought of Thomas often. He had returned to his regular duties, guarding doors, standing in corridors, silent and steady as always. But Charlotte noticed something different about him now. Other staff members treated him with more respect. Some even sought his advice. Word of what he had done had spread, and though he never spoke of it, others did. One afternoon, Charlotte asked her mother a question. "Why did Thomas help me when no one else did?" Her mother paused, considering carefully. "Because he saw you. Not as a princess, not as a title, but as a person, a child who needed someone to believe in her." Charlotte nodded slowly. "I want to be like that when I grow up." Her mother smiled, tears in her eyes. "Then you will be a great queen one day." Charlotte looked out the window, toward the gardens where Thomas often stood guard. "Do you think he knows how much it meant?" "I think he does," her mother said gently. "People like Thomas don't do things for recognition. They do them because it's right." That evening, Charlotte wrote a letter. Not a formal one. Just a simple note. She folded it carefully and walked through the palace halls until she found Thomas. He was stationed near the east wing. Standing at attention, "Thomas," she said softly. He looked down at her, his expression kind. "Your Highness." She held out the letter. "This is for you." Took it surprised. "Thank you." "You don't have to read it now," she said quickly. "But I wanted you to know. You changed everything for me. You made me feel like I mattered." Thomas's eyes softened. "You do matter, Princess Charlotte. More than you know." She smiled, then turned and walked away, her footsteps light. Later that night, alone in his small quarters, Thomas unfolded the letter. It was written in Charlotte's careful handwriting. "Dear Thomas, I don't know how to say thank you for what you did. You stood up for me when I felt invisible. You believed in me when no one else did. I was so scared, but you made me feel safe. I will never forget what you did. And I promise when I am older, I will do the same for others. I will stand up for people who have no voice. Just like you did for me. You are the bravest person I know, with all my heart." Charlotte Thomas stared at the letter for a long time. Then, carefully, he folded it and placed it in his pocket, close to his heart. He had not acted for thanks. He had not acted for recognition. He had acted because it was right. But knowing that he had made a difference in the life of one small, brave girl, that was worth everything. Months passed. The palace returned to its rhythms. The scandal faded from the headlines. David Brennan faced trial and was sentenced to prison. The necklace was returned to its display, under tighter security than ever before. But for those who had lived through those tense days, nothing was quite the same. Charlotte threw herself into her studies with new focus. She read more, asked more questions. She attended public events with a quiet confidence that surprised even her parents. She was still shy, still gentle, but there was something else now. A steel beneath the softness. People began to notice. The press called her poised, graceful, mature beyond her years. But Charlotte knew the truth. She wasn't fearless. She was still afraid sometimes, still unsure. But she had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting despite it. She had learned that from Thomas. One crisp autumn morning, Charlotte was walking through the palace gardens. The leaves had turned gold and red, and the air smelled of earth and change. She spotted Thomas near the south gate, standing at his post. She approached him slowly. "May I speak with you?" Thomas turned, surprised. "Of course, Your Highness." She looked up at him, her young face serious. "I wanted to ask you something. Why did you risk everything for me? You could have lost your job, your career, everything you worked for." Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he knelt down, bringing himself to her level. His voice was soft but firm. "Because, Your Highness, some things are worth more than a job, more than a career. You were being treated unfairly, and I couldn't stand by and let that happen. Not to you, not to anyone." Charlotte's eyes glistened. "But I'm just one person." Thomas shook his head. "No, you are not just one person. You are a person, and every person matters. That is something I learned long ago, and it is something I will never forget." Charlotte nodded slowly, absorbing his words. "I want to be someone who stands up for others, like you did." Thomas smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "Then you already are, Your Highness. You already are." They stood in silence for a moment, the world quiet around them. Then Charlotte did something unexpected. She reached out and took Thomas's hand, not as a princess to a guard, but as one human being to another. "Thank you," she whispered. Thomas squeezed her hand gently. "It was my honor." As Charlotte walked back toward the palace, Thomas watched her go. She was just a child, but she carried herself with a grace and strength that reminded him why he had chosen this life, why he wore the uniform, why he served. Not for power, not for glory, but for moments like this, for the chance to protect something good in a world that often forgot what goodness was. Years would pass. Charlotte would grow. She would face new challenges, new scrutiny, new battles, but she would never forget the guard who stood beside her when the world turned against her, and Thomas would continue his quiet service. Knowing that he had done something that truly mattered, he had protected not just a princess, he had protected a child, and in doing so, he had reminded everyone around him that duty without compassion is hollow, that rules without mercy are meaningless, that true honor lies not in following orders blindly, but in standing up for what is right even when it costs you everything. The sun set over Kensington Palace, casting long shadows across the gardens. Inside, life continued. Dinners were served. Meetings were held. The world moved on, but in the heart of one small girl, in the quiet soul of one steadfast guard, something had changed forever. They had found courage in each other, and that courage would echo through the years to come, because sometimes the most powerful stories are not about kings and queens. They are about the people who stand in the shadows, protecting the light and the children who learn from them that kindness, courage, and truth are the greatest powers of all.